Hi everyone, my name is Janice Bria and I'm here to introduce you guys to an organization that I'm starting up. The organization is called the Harvard Dance Experiment, and the idea is to bring together all of the different dance groups at Harvard and have them offer self-contained workshops for complete beginners. And so the idea is that people who really don't know how to dance but are interested in learning could try out a variety of styles that are already here at Harvard from other students, and just have a really informal space for people to get together and exercise and just have fun. So if you think you might be interested, we're trying to gauge how many people might be interested and see if we can make this a reality. Please join the Facebook group, Harvard Dance Experiment, or send an email to hdancexp@gmail.com. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So here's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to finish up with the mind-body. We're going to talk about sleep. We're going to talk about touch. And then we're going to move on to a topic that I'm absolutely in love with, which is love. We'll talk about relationships. Where we finished off last time, we talked about the mind-body connection, we talked about the importance of exercise, we talked about the importance of mindfulness meditation, how it quite literally transforms, changes the form of our brain, making the left side of the prefrontal cortex more active relative to the right side. And then we talked about the importance of breathing, and how breathing, if we introduce it strategically throughout the day, can quite literally change our lives, whether it's standing in front of a red light, whether it's the first thing when we wake up in the morning, whether it's as we enter the class, or right now. Deep breathing, deep belly breathing shifts us from the fight or flight response to the relaxation response. Remember, one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning of the course is that I will not be teaching you many new things here. And this is a clear example of that. You all know how to breathe deeply, properly. You knew it from the day you were born, or the moment you were born. But over the years, with increasing levels of stress and the lack of recovery, over the years with the mounting pressure and the speed of modern life, we've had limitations imposed on us. We've been put under stress. We haven't been taught how to recover. And what we need to do now is chip away those limitations. Go back to our innate inclination of breathing deeply. And when we do that, we reverse the fight or flight and create a growth spiral between calm and well-being and deep breathing that leads to more calm and well-being and more deep breathing. The next topic I want to talk about, but I don't want you to apply it right now, but later, is sleep. Here are some statistics about sleep. So before Edison invented the light bulb, people slept on average about 10 hours every 24 hours. 10 hours a day, most of it at night, but sometimes during the day as well. Today, the average person gets about 6.9 hours of sleep during the week and 7.5 hours of sleep on the weekend. That's the national average. For college students, it's a little bit different. How many people, just so I get a show of hands, how many of you, other than me, get a full 8 hours of sleep a night? Okay. I'm sure there are many more. They're probably asleep now. So here is the national average. Between 18 to 29-year-olds, about a quarter get 8 hours of sleep. 75% don't get enough sleep. Now, for some people, they need 7 hours, some people need 9, some 16, no. The average is 8. We all vary somewhere around that. There are very few people that need very little sleep, and there are very few people that actually need a lot of sleep. And how do we know how much sleep we need? When do we wake up naturally? When we go to sleep when we're tired. And that's how we can gauge it. It's around 8 hours. Now, many people are saying, okay, for me to get 8 hours of sleep, I'll need 30-hour days. It's not enough. It's a third of 24 hours. That's too much. I can't afford it. Well, you can afford it if you look at it as an investment, if you make it a priority. It's like a business person going and making a deal and saying, well, I can't afford spending $100,000 on this deal. Well, you can't afford giving it away, but what if you will get a return on investment of 20% a year? Then it changes. Then yeah, maybe I can afford 100,000 if there is an ROI, return on investment on it. The same with sleep. And there's a lot of return on investment on these 8 hours. A lot of research showing how important sleep is and why we need to make it a priority. So let me list just a few very briefly. First of all, physical immune system. Strengthens significant. I mean, we all know that when we go on little sleep, we're more likely to be unwell after an exam period, and it's related to stress as well, but sleep in and of itself, enough sleep strengthens our immune system. Energy levels. Now, there are a lot of theories going around that, well, it's better to sleep 5 hours than 7 hours because of certain cycles, and yeah, these cycles exist. But in general, more sleep to a point is better. If we're sleeping more than 10 or more than 11 hours a day, sometimes it's associated with going through difficult times. Sometimes it's associated with depression. Depression can lead to insomnia, or it can lead to the opposite, sleeping too much. As I said, if you're sleeping 10 hours a day, it may mean that you need 10 hours a day. Doesn't mean that you're depressed, doesn't mean that there's something wrong. But check it out. See throughout your life how many hours of sleep did you need on average. More sleep is generally better up to a certain point. We talked about physical exercise, and that when we don't exercise, what we're doing is our weight goes up beyond its base level, beyond its God-given or genes-given, our natural state. Which is why most diets fail when they're not associated with exercise. The same applies to sleep. If we don't sleep enough, we go beyond our base level of weight. Actually, correlation, and not just correlation, causation. Lack of sleep to putting on weight. And if we try and diet, we're fighting our nature again. Simply sleep enough. That's one of the contributing factors to effective weight management. Motor skills. 100,000 road accidents on average each year as a result of lack of sleep. 40,000 injuries, 1,500 people killed a year in this country as a result of lack of sleep. Either themselves being the drivers who didn't sleep, or being on the receiving end of the accident. In the workplace, day in and day out, accidents are caused because of lack of sleep, costing the economy an estimated $100 billion a year. Cognitive functioning, whether it's creativity, productivity, as well as memory, that is hurt when we don't sleep, which is why sleep is such an important investment. Very often we say, well, let me stay up 2 more hours so I can study. Whereas in fact, you would get much more studying done. You'll remember the material better, be more creative if you get these extra 2 hours of sleep. Good return on investment. Very often we can learn a lot about ourselves through babies. Why? Because babies don't suppress emotions. What happens to a baby when he or she doesn't get enough sleep? They're cranky, they cry, they're miserable, they're anxious. We know that. Now, we learn not to look like that baby that we saw when we talked about the permission to be human, to cry one moment and to laugh the next. So we suppress these emotions. But we still have them, no different when we don't get enough sleep. That's when our fuse is shorter. That's when we blow up more often. That's when we feel anxious. Again, it's unhealthy on the physical level. Of course, it's unhealthy psychologically. Affects depression in an even more significant way for two reasons. The first reason, that lack of sleep is likely to lead to depression, is because for the physical level, again, just like you see a baby is cranky when it's tired, we're cranky when we're tired. So that's just the pure physical level of needing sleep. The second reason is a little bit more subtle and a little bit more interesting. What happens at night is that our mind processes a lot of the things that we have gone through throughout the day. And very often it solves unresolved issues that we have gone throughout the day. Which is why you go to sleep with a math problem, often you wake up in the morning with a solution. But it's not just math problems that are solved at night. It is also other interpersonal, intrapersonal issues that are solved throughout the night. And if you look at dreams, usually the dreams that we have early on during the night are actually less pleasant, enjoyable dreams. We're more likely to have pleasant dreams later on in the night. Why? Because the first part of the night, that's when we're working on problems. We're dealing with issues. Some that were conscious, some that were not conscious during the day. Later on, after we have resolved a few of these problems, our dreams become more pleasant. Again, this doesn't mean you can't have a nightmare at 11:30 a.m., but it means that you're more likely to have bad dreams earlier on. And when we don't give ourselves the opportunity to quote-unquote complete our dreaming, complete problem solving through the night, we wake up with that problem unresolved. And then it's there, whether it's on the conscious or subconscious level, it's unresolved. And we pay a price for it. And over time, when we have a lot of unresolved issues, especially when they're suppressed or repressed, we're more likely to enter depression. So sleep for the physical need of sleep as well as for the psychological need of sleep. Now, everyone talks about beauty sleep. Why? Because that's manifest, that's obvious. You can tell when a person hasn't slept for 24, 36 hours. There are rings around the eyes, so you can hide them, but still you can see when someone is enervated. But it's not just about a beauty sleep. It's also about happiness sleep. It is also about intelligence sleep. Because we know that people who haven't slept, say, for 24 hours, after 24 hours, their IQ is reduced by 10 points or more. So there is beauty sleep for sure, but there is also happiness sleep as well as intelligence sleep. It's a good investment on every level. Here are just very briefly some tips on sleep. The first thing, more or less 8 hours a day. Find what is right for you, but that could mean 7 hours at night and 1 hour in the afternoon, or it could mean 6 and 2. But generally, we need 8 hours a day. If you can't get these 8 hours a day, and there are periods in your life where you won't be able to, such as exam period, where it may be a little bit more difficult to get the 8 hours, or another stressful period, or when you have children. So what do? Naps. Naps have actually been shown to be extremely effective. Cat naps during the day. Sleep for 20 minutes. It's not as good as sleeping the extra 2 hours at night, but it's certainly a lot better than not getting any sleep during the day. So naps are also a very good investment. Take a power nap for 15, 20 minutes during the day. That, to an extent, not like a full night, but to an extent, restores some of the cognitive as well as the emotional capacities. Many people who have problems falling asleep, the reason is because they eat too late or they exercise too late, and the blood is still flowing fast, the heart is still beating, they're energized. So not to eat too much before some people, can fall asleep as they're eating. But there are certain people for whom it's a little bit more of an issue. So just watch your diet a little bit. watch your exercise regime not to exercise too late. Also, other people who have insomnia, in large numbers do have insomnia, is to give yourself permission to be human. I don't think there is one person in this room who hasn't at times had difficulty falling asleep. Before the SATs, before an exam, before a date. And it's natural. No, generally I don't have problems falling asleep. I get to 10 p.m. and I'm zonked. But sometimes when I did have problems during difficult periods, stressful periods, initially I would tell myself, okay, fall asleep now, fall asleep now, fall asleep, right? It's like, don't be anxious, don't be anxious. And then you have pink elephants preventing you from going to sleep. Instead, give yourself permission to be human. Now, if I have difficulty falling asleep, I say to myself, well, it's an opportunity to think and reflect. And very often that bores me and I fall asleep. Permission to be human. And finally, what are your internal rhythms? Now, because we have the light bulbs today, because we're living indoors as opposed to in huts that are exposed or caves that are directly in touch with nature, we have separated ourselves from nature. And we pay a price for it. Whether we pay a price for it because we don't exercise enough, since we don't have to go hunt and gather, and we pay a price also because we don't pay attention, we're no longer cognizant, mindful or heartful of our internal rhythms. How many hours a night do you need? Are you a night person or a morning person? Do you need to go to sleep at 10 p.m. or do you need to go to sleep at 5 a.m.? What's right for you? And try and create a life that is in line with your natural needs. Now, that's not always possible. If you go and work in college, it's relatively possible. You're quite flexible because you can come. This class is at 11:30, or most class it's also videotaped. So if you want to sleep till noon, that's fine too, and then you watch it. So you can play around with it. When you work in the future, or when you were in high school, and high school started at 7:30 or 8, you had to be there. But still, as much as possible, try and be aware, cognizant of your internal rhythms in terms of the hours that you need and also when you need those hours. There's been a lot of research on sleep. There are entire seminars, classes just on the need for sleep. Let me summarize through the work of William Dement, who is a professor at Stanford and does a lot of sleep research when he's awake. Effects of sleep deprivation on health and well-being have been documented by research. Cognitive skills and physical performance are impaired by sleep deprivation, but mood is affected even more. People who get less than a full night's sleep are prone to feel less happy, more stressed, more physically frail, and more mentally and physically exhausted as a result. Sufficient sleep makes us feel better, happier, more vigorous, and vital. I don't think there's one person in the room who didn't already know this. Again, we're not teaching you anything new. I'm just reminding you of the things that you already know. Let me move on to a topic that is related to my favorite topic, and that is touch. Americans are, in general, again this is a generalization, average, in general, are among the least tactile people in the world. We spend a lot of time indulging our other senses, going to great restaurants, perfuming ourselves and our boyfriends with the best smell. But we don't touch enough. And it's a physical need, just like sleep is, just like exercise is, just like relationships are. And it's an important part of relationships. The best work in the area was done by Tiffany Field, who was a massage therapist, and saw the effects of massage, went out, studied this topic, got her PhD, and now is a professor at the University of Miami. And what she showed through her research and other people's research is how important getting in touch with touch is. For example, for physical health, whether it's our immune system strengthens significantly with touch, weakens drastically without sufficient touch. It helps overcome injuries. And that's not just professional massage or professional physiotherapist, just the act of touch. Children grow more when they're touched, and we'll talk about research in a minute, some mind-boggling research. It's physical health, it's also mental health. Once again, children's cognitive development is affected by touch. Mental health in terms of mood disorders, eating disorders are associated very often with lack of touch, or not enough touch. Depression and anxiety are caused by lack of touch, can be overcome often with more touch. And hopefully you're convinced now. Better sex life with touch. So William Masters and Virginia Johnson, two of the most important sex therapists and researchers. What they have shown is that sexual dysfunction, most sexual dysfunctions, in fact between 70 and 95% of them, can be solved simply with the help of touch. So what they're saying actually is that foreplay should not just be used as a means toward an end. They're saying that it can be an end in itself. And what touch does is essentially what positive psychology is all about. Sex, no. So, did I say that out loud? Yes, I guess I did. All right, so what positive psychology is about is, remember, getting us from the negative to the zero, but then getting us from the zero to the positive. So what they have shown in their research is that touch helps sexual dysfunction. Okay, let's function, let's get you here. But they're also saying is that touch then contributes to a thriving sexual relationship. So it's not just helping with problems, it's also taking us from the zero to the thriving. Marty Seligman has a book about looking at generally psychological interventions, those that work and those that don't. And as we've talked about in class a lot, most of the interventions do not work. We saw it with the Cambridge-Somerville study, where 5 years of interventions actually had a negative effect in the long term. We see it with so many of the self-help books offering quick fixes. They don't work. He researched William Masters and Johnson's studies, and what he found, doing a meta-analysis, is that between 70 and 95% of the time their prescription works. Again, this is almost unheard of in social psychology or social sciences intervention. But these things work. Now, touch is a need, as I said earlier, just like touch is a need, just like physical exercise is a need, just like food and sleep are needs. So there's a story about a hospital ward for premature babies. And what they found there was that one of the sections in that hospital ward for premature babies had a much higher level of success compared to the other sections in the hospital ward. In other words, the babies were getting better much more promptly. They were healthier. When they followed them in the long term, they actually showed better cognitive as well as physical development. And they were wondering about it, and they thought, could it be the air? Could it be the location in the hospital? Because everything else was identical. They got the same food, they got the same treatment. And one of the doctors really wanted to find out what was it about this specific section in the hospital for premature babies that actually contributed so much to their well-being. So he was, watching the place, and then one night he was just sitting somewhere out of sight, and he heard a sound. And he looked, didn't want to be seen, and a nurse came in, a nurse whom he knew, who'd been in the hospital for a long time. And the nurse walked in, picked up a premature baby, which was against the rules in the hospital, because they cannot be touched. They had to be in their incubators. Picked up the baby and just stroked him. Just touched him very gently. Talked to him and then put the baby down. And then walked to the next incubator, picked up the baby and just very gently stroked him and put him back down, and did that to all the babies in that section of the ward. Now, she did it late at night during her shift because it was against the rules. And then she walked out. And that incident spawned off a whole line of research about the importance of touch with babies in general, specifically with premature babies. So Tiffany Fields did this study where premature babies were subject to 45 minutes a day of massage while they were in the hospital. Very gentle massage, and they're tiny. And what they found was that these babies put on 47% more weight while they were in hospital. A year later, when they were already at home, they had better development physically, as well as in terms of cognitive skills, as well as motor skills, just as a result of being touched more often. We need touch. It is an innate, instinctual need. In fact, there's been research on touch deprivation, and it wasn't done on human beings, it was done on monkeys. Harry Harlow, a very famous psychologist, worked with a group of monkeys whom he took away from their mothers, didn't provide them any touch. Every other need was provided. And what he found was that these monkeys didn't grow physically as much as the other monkeys. Their cognitive development was impaired, and they displayed autistic-like behavior. For example, they would sit down, put their legs up, and then rock. Have you seen this? You know, like in what's the movie with Dustin Hoffman? The Rain Man. You know, where he would just sit down and rock this way. So many of these monkeys displayed exactly this behavior, this rocking autistic behavior. Cruel study, whether it's done on ants or monkeys, certainly on human beings. Unfortunately, it has been done on human beings. This is one of the largest natural, tragic experiments ever carried out. This specifically was done in Romania, under Ceausescu, the cruel dictator that ruled over the country until 1989. One thing that he did was take many kids away from their parents, especially if the parents were dissidents, especially if the parents were not, quote-unquote, kosher communists. So he took their kids and raised 150,000 kids in homes away from their parents. Now, these homes, because it was a very poor country, had no money for nurses, for enough nurses, had no money for enough support staff in general. So while these kids got all their physical needs, in terms of food, water, and they were cleaned, they did not get much affection. Not because the nurses didn't want to give them affection, they just didn't have the time. In 1989, after the wall fell, Ceausescu was ousted, and these kids were released from these homes. And psychologists went in, and what they saw was the result of this tragic natural experiment. In terms of physical growth, these kids were between 3 and 10% in size relative to their age group. Cognitive growth, the level of way below the 100 IQ average. Motor development also impaired significantly as a result of lack of touch. And many of these kids were sitting down with their legs to their chest and just rocking. The effect of touch deprivation. Now, touch is important, once again, to get us here. And we're here, we're fine. The question is, how do we get beyond this? Well, touch can take us there as well. Not just to being okay, but also to thriving. The importance of touch. Virginia Satir, who's a psychologist, has this to say. We need 4 hugs a day for survival. We need 8 hugs a day for maintenance. We need 12 hugs a day for growth. Again, she says it half, in jest. There is not actual research showing how many hugs. Very good. You have 11 more left for today. But good. So there is, though, actual research on hugs. So this is Jane Clipman, who did research, and here was the intervention, very simple. It was every day give at least 5 hugs. These are frontal hugs, not with your, partner, just hugs to different people, friends, can be your partner as well, but these are specifically non-sexual hugs. And what she found after 4 weeks was that the people who were in this group as opposed to the control group, and the control group had to write how many hours a day they read, the control group level of happiness obviously didn't go up. The group that hugged 5 times a day went up significantly. Now this experiment, when she talks about, she says it was much more difficult for some people, especially for men. But even the men who were part of it, most of them hugged, so they would do it on the sports field, they would find opportunities, or somehow got in 5 hugs a day. And those people who did that actually became happier. Now, I was going to assign this as your response paper this week. I'm not going to do it, but I recommend it. So it's a very strong recommendation and suggestion. From now on and for the rest of your life, at least 5 hugs, preferably 12. The nice thing about hugs is that it's a win-win. Because when we hug someone, we're hugged back. When we touch someone, we're touched back. It's like happiness. When we share it, it grows. It's a win-win, positive-sum game. The important thing to keep in mind about hugs and touch in general is to respect the other person, because not everyone feels as comfortable being touched as we do. Or we may not feel comfortable being touched, and that's fine. For many reasons. One could be upbringing, one could be just physically, people are different. There are some people who enjoy touch much more than others, and that's fine, it's natural. So we need to respect other people's boundaries as well as have others respect our own. But in general, touch is important, touch is good, and we need to become a more tactile individual as well as a more tactile society. Let me show you an example now of how some people like hugs more than others. Okay, so once again, here is the prescription. Very simple. 4 times at least a week of 30 minutes of physical exercise, at least. Mindfulness meditation, if it's good for you, every day 10-15 minutes. If not, at the very least, a few deep breaths strategically placed throughout the day. 8 hours of sleep a night, and at least 5, ideally 12 hugs a day. This is probably the most powerful psychological prescription that you will ever get or hear about. And all it does is bring us back to our base level of well-being, our God-given or genes-given level of happiness.